Hey, everybody, please subscribe, like, and share.
Good. All right. Christopher Peaks back here today with Brandon Mosley for our BCS State of Alabama podcast. And we've got another guest here for you today. We've been bringing a lot of new people to office, but this man has an incredible story. He is running for state auditor. His name is Derek Chen. Derek, how are you today, sir?
I'm doing well, Chris. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you and Brandon having me on.
Hey, thanks for for coming on. I didn't, I'm glad you've watched some of the other podcasts that we've had. So look, man, you've got an awesome story to tell about how your family came here and what you said about fighting the communists and with immigration. Why don't you tell that story to the voters? And
Sure, that'd be great. Thank you. Yeah, so I was born and raised in Southern California. And how my family got to the US is really interesting. So my great grandparents fought in Chiang Kai-shek's army during the Chinese Civil War against the communists. And as the communists started taking over large areas of land in China, Chiang Kai shek and his military retreated to the island of Taiwan. And so my great grandparents went to the island of Taiwan with Chiang Kai shek. And my grandparents were little kids at the time. And so that's where they grew up. My parents were born and raised in Taiwan. And during the late 70s, President Carter's administration decided that they wanted to switch diplomatic recognition from Taiwan's government to China's government. And when they did that, everybody in Taiwan thought that the communists were about to invade and that they were about to invade imminently. So everyone in Taiwan who could get out tried to get out. And so this was in the late 70s, and my family immigrated to the US in the early mid 80s. And so I always wondered, why did it take several years before they actually moved to the US? So one day I asked my granddad, I said, Granddad, why why did it take you guys so long to move to the United States if everyone thought that the communists were about to invade imminently? And I never forgot what he told me. He said, yes, we were scared. Yes, we were afraid. But what kind of example would I be setting for my kids if we broke the laws of our new country in order to get here? We had to do it the right way. We had to wait for our visas and go through the long vetting process. And so that's what took them so long to immigrate to the US. And, that is something that really resonated with me. And that's why I think it's so important to encourage legal immigration and combat illegal immigration, because it's not fair for the folks that have to wait in line and do it the right way for folks to skip the line and skip over them. So that was how my family got to the U.S. I was born and raised in Southern California. I've been a lifelong Republican, a lifelong conservative, and I really stuck out like a sore thumb philosophically living in California. And I knew fairly early on that I wanted to see different parts of the country, and so I made an intentional effort when I was going to school that I would go to different regions of the country to see where I liked it the best. And so I went to Hope College, which is a private Christian liberal arts college in West Michigan. It's in the town of Holland, Michigan. And so I went there. I loved it, was chairman of the college Republicans, and worked on and helped with several Republican campaigns during that time. And it was a really interesting time to be the college Republicans chairman, because this was during the 2016 presidential election cycle. And President Trump was running for office for the first time. And I remember watching his speech coming down from the escalator in Trump Tower. And I heard that speech and I knew that was the candidate that I was going to be for. And so I volunteered on his first campaign during the 2016 Republican primary cycle, and was proud that I was able to cast my very first vote that I ever cast was for President Trump in the 2016 Republican primary. Michigan was a very important swing state where I was living, and was grateful that I was able to volunteer on his campaign, and was really excited to see him elected as our 45th president. Was fortunate to be able to attend his 2017 inauguration in Washington, and that was just an amazing experience. And then, but after I was getting ready to finish up undergraduate, I knew I wanted to go to law school. And so I was talking to the president of Hope College at the time, and he said, Derek, there's a school I want you to take a look at. And I used to teach there. It's in Birmingham, Alabama, and it's called Samford University. And it's a great school. It's very similar to Hope College, except Samford has graduate programs. And so he put me in touch with the admissions folks, and I came down to visit, and I just absolutely fell in love with the campus, fell in love with Alabama, and that's where I went to law school. And shortly after attending as a student at Cumberland, I knew that this was where I wanted to spend the rest of my life, was Alabama. And it's just really refreshing to be in such a conservative state now, where I feel at home and folks have welcomed me. And I'm just really grateful to be here as a proud Alabamian now.
So, Derek, when we see what's going on with the Democrats today, and basically they're Marxist, that along with the immigration, those are very important things to you that hit home. Is that correct?
Absolutely. And Chris, when my grandparents were fleeing the threat of communism, they came to the United States of America. If we lose our freedoms here at home, where do we go? And so that's why it's so important to me to fight for freedom and liberty and American values, on all levels of government, not just on the national level, but on the state and local level as well, because those are very important levels. And I think it's so important to fight for America's values, on all levels of government. And that's really why I really appreciated President Trump all the way back in 2016. Was he really put at the forefront of his campaign the issue of his America First agenda, and he recognizes the importance of supporting legal immigration while combating illegal immigration. And I just really, that topic really resonated with me from the very beginning.
Derek, you've declared for state auditor. Of all the positions, on the ballot in 2026, why do you want to be state auditor?
Yeah, so if you don't mind, let me go over the state auditor's duties and responsibilities real quick. So the state auditor, under the Alabama Constitution and the Alabama Code, has several duties, one of which is to keep inventory of state property, physical state property that has a market value of $500 or greater. So anything owned by a state agency, desks, sofas, computers, etc., physical property that's worth over $500 is kept. The inventory is kept by the state auditor's office. The state auditor also makes appointments for registrars in 66 of the 67 counties in the state of Alabama. The only county where the auditor does not get a registrar appointment is actually the county which I live in, Jefferson County, because of a quirk in the law where Jefferson County gets to appoint their own registrar through through Jefferson County's own process. But in all other counties in the state of Alabama, the auditor gets a registrar's appointment. And I think that's a very important but often overlooked part of the job, is registrar appointments, because registrars are so important in our process because they are the only officials in the state of Alabama that have the authority to add anyone to the voter rolls or remove anyone from the voter rolls. And I think it's so important that we get competent, qualified folks in the registrar's position that understand the importance of election security and the importance of the rule of law. And I think it's really important for our folks to understand that only eligible U.S. citizens that are residents of the state of Alabama should ever be allowed to vote in Alabama's elections, period. No ifs, ands, or buts. So there's a diverse portfolio of duties for the state auditor's office, and it's an open seat. And I figured with my law background, as a graduate of Cumberland, and also with my business background, I have an MBA from the University of Alabama. I figured with my law and business background that I'd be able to do an effective job in this role.
Derek, let me ask you kind of a question here. It's probably gonna make you laugh, but kind of may make you mad too. That somebody contact me about. Now, and don't let this offend you, okay? But we hear about DEI all the time. Now, this is what our version of DEI is for Republicans. We want merit-based people, and we're the big party, and we want people. We're not just a party of wanting just white men. We want to be diverse. So glad to have you in the Republican Party. But are you an agent of the Chinese Communist government?
Absolutely not. I have family members that fought the communists, and it's so important that we recognize as Americans. I'm an American, and that's 110% of my allegiance is with the United States and only America. And I think it's so important that folks realize that China is not our friend. I've seen it firsthand with my family experience. And I think that it's so important to recognize that China's goals are global domination, and we need to do everything that we can as Americans to stop that and combat that threat. You take a look at the situation with drones. I'm sure you guys are familiar with it. DJI, which is a Chinese drone manufacturing company. If you go to your local stores and you look at the price of a Chinese-made drone, and you look at the price of an American-made drone, the Chinese drone is much cheaper. And it's important for folks to realize that those drones are not being offered at a cheap price out of the kindness of China's hearts. The drones are offered at a cheap price in order because they want us as Alabamians, us as Americans, to buy them so that they're able to collect the data, and they have a backdoor system where that data could go back to China, and they want to collect data. So it's really important. I think it's important for us to take a look at banning Chinese drones. And another thing that is really important to me is I think we need to take a strong look at banning Chinese corporations and Chinese nationals from buying up Alabama's farmland. Food security is so important. Food security is national security. And take a look at Smithfield Foods, which is the largest pork producer in the world, and it's owned by a Chinese parent corporation. And what if they decide that they want to disrupt our food supply and shut that down? So it's something that we really need to be very careful and mindful of. But so to answer your question, the answer is absolutely not, of course. And I have family members that had friends who died fighting the communists. So
Do you support taking a hard line stance against the Chinese government? I mean,
Absolutely.
that sounds harder. Go ahead.
Absolutely, we have to. And I think, my background is interesting in the sense that I was able to see family members who had to escape the threat of the Chinese Communist Party, and to see firsthand the threat that they pose to us as Americans.
Derek, President Trump is getting a lot of criticism for his tariffs, especially on China. Should Americans just accept that things are going to be slightly higher when they go down to Dollar General and buy cheap Chinese goods because of the tariff? But that, Reese maybe getting our stuff from our allies, or better yet, making it ourselves, would be better for the country in the long run.
Well, I think that President Trump really understands the issue as a businessman, that how important it is to support American manufacturing and to build up our economic infrastructure here in our country so that we can produce a lot of these products here at home. And I think that President Trump is very mindful of the importance of promoting American industry and American manufacturing here in the United States.
Derek, a lot of times us Americans, especially the left, but I mean, us conservatives too, we kind of lose, track, or maybe not have the thankfulness enough of our freedoms. Do you feel that being a first generation or over here, that you have more of appreciation for the freedoms that we have because of what your family went through?
I think that is, I do have a very deep appreciation for our freedoms and liberty that oftentimes I think as Americans, as an American born citizen, takes for granted. We think of freedom and liberty. It's so ingrained in our way of life, but it's just one generation away from we're just one generation away from losing it. And I think that we need to be very mindful that that's why it's so important for us citizens to speak out and fight for freedom and liberty, because it's just we're just one generation away. We could just be one generation away from losing it, and it's so important that we don't.
Derek, in most states, the auditor is in charge of auditing state agencies. It's not that way in Alabama because the auditor is in the Constitution, so the legislature couldn't get rid of it, but they kind of got sideways with an auditor in 39. So the legislature took those powers to themselves and put that in the examiners of public accounts, which is sort of a weird way of doing it. Do you think the legislature should consider giving the auditor powers back to the state auditor?
I think it's something that certainly needs to be taken a look at. You're right, Brandon. It's the state auditor's office is a constitutional office. So in order to change the Constitution, the legislature would have to pass through a supermajority of both houses of the Alabama legislature, and it would have to go to a vote of the people. And I just do not believe that the people would be supportive of getting rid of a government accountability office.
But now the legislature would have to pass, and then the people would have to ratify an amendment to abolish the office.
Right.
But now legislatively in 39, they took the auditor powers away from the auditor, but left the office and left y'all in charge of the registrar's thing and, maintaining our property inventory.
Right.
Should the legislature, I mean, again, and nobody that's in the legislature now was even alive when the legislature pulled this stunt in 39 or 43 or whenever this went into effect. Should they undo that constitutional deal where a legislature now has direct control over the examiner of public accounts who does audits.
I think it's something very important to take a look at. Yes, I agree. I do.
So, Derek, have you always wanted to be an elected official? Or what is it that really drew you to politics?
Well, I've been a lifelong Republican. I think that it's so important for us as citizens to speak out on behalf of issues and our philosophy that we hold dear and important, and conservative values and conservative principles have always been really important to me. So I have always believed that, I am currently a holder of the most important office of our land, which is the office of citizen. And I've always been active in trying to uh, speak out on behalf of issues that I think are important. But it would be a great honor to also be to put my name forward for public service in this capacity as well.
Derek, you're still rather young, certainly compared to me and Christopher. But you've only been in the state now for what, about 6 years?
I moved here in 2018.
Okay, so 7 years now, almost
Yes.
7. I know I see you all over the place. So you know Jefferson County, you know Shelby County, you kind of know Mobile, Montgomery, but the auditor appoints registrars, well, except for Jefferson, that's a different story. Or, the other 66 counties. How are you going to identify who you want to appoint for, like, the Bullock County or the Elmore County registrars?
That's a great question. I think it's so important for when you're looking through these appointments that you do a very thorough vetting process to make sure that the folks that you're appointing are competent and qualified and understand the importance of election integrity. That's very, very important to me. And a big part of that, in a statewide position where you're making appointments all over the state, is you have to be able to identify the folks that you trust to kind of help you start the vetting process. And of course, it's important for you to vet individually as well. But it's important to have folks that are able to provide recommendations of people that you should consider.
So, Derek, tell me about your time as you said you worked on the Trump campaign in 2016.
Yes.
Okay, what was it like going to the inauguration?
It was an amazing experience. It was the very first president that I ever got to vote for. And it was just an amazing experience getting to see him get sworn into office. And he's done such an amazing job as the 45th president and is doing such an amazing job as our 47th president. And I believe that he will continue doing so.
Derek, this is your first run. Are you confident that, you don't have that big a track record with the voters, that you can get out there in front of enough people, in the state? The biggest city in Alabama is Huntsville, which is hard for an old guy like me to even wrap my mind around, because I remember when that was like the number 4.
Yeah.
Because again, your household record, you're running, against an opponent who has run like 3 or 4 times statewide. So you're coming in at a deficit on name recognition. Are you confident you can bridge that goal?
Absolutely, Brandon. The thing is, that's what campaigns are for, is having your message to the voters, and uh, kind of getting to visit with as many voters as you can and have them get to know you and you get to know them. I've been working hard on doing so, traveling all over the state. And I think that I'm going to continue doing so. We still have a lot of time. We're not even a year out from the election yet for the Republican primary, and I just am going to continue to get to shake as many hands and hear from as many voters as I can, and I believe that we'll be able to be very successful in that regard.
Let me further on that, Derek. And the question that I kind of want to jokingly asked you about being an agent of the Chinese government. Are you concerned that there's still so much xenophobia out here that it's going to hamper your campaign?
I really don't, Chris. Going back to your question earlier, with respect to the issue with China, not only am I not a secret Chinese agent, I'm the opposite of it, in the sense that I am a proud, patriotic American, American born and bred. And the thing is, I think when folks, when you get to know folks and you get to meet folks and just tell them about my story, and what I stand for, I think it really resonates with a lot of voters. And I've been very grateful that so far that has been the case across the state of Alabama. So, no, the thing is, I would not, I do not want somebody to vote for me because of my race. I want people to vote for me because of my work ethic, my character, and what I stand for. And I think that the folks in Alabama have been so welcoming to me. The folks in Alabama have really taken me in since I moved here, and I think that we'll be able to successfully get our message out to the voters.
Derek, I've interviewed both of the previous two auditors, Andrew Sorrell, who is not running for reelection, so you're not running against him, and Jim Ziegler, who served 2 terms in the office. And one thing they both said to me is that they're frustrated because their auditors can find where people have thrown away, damaged, or stolen even, items that belong to the state, but the auditor is like powerless to actually punish somebody. They can send, hey, attorney generals or district attorney, we may have an issue here, or they could send, email to your supervisor saying, hey, this person's a dork. We can't trust him with our equipment. Please punish him. Do you think they need to put like an enforcement arm, maybe like assign a assistant AG over to the auditors so that you could, actually bring legal action against, miscreants that misuse our stuff?
Sure. So you're right, Brandon. The way that the procedure works now is the auditor is in charge of the property audits. If there has been found to be negligence or misuse of public property, that information has to be sent to the attorney general's office or the district attorney's office, who would then choose whether or not that they want to pursue a criminal indictment with respect to the misuse of state property. And that really goes back to something that I think is really important, is that we need to enforce the laws on the books. And I look forward to working with local district attorneys and the attorney general's office if I'm elected, and sitting down and talking to them and seeing, how can we make this process work and actually go after folks who are misusing our state property.
Do you think we should have a Doge type cabinet position or something like that in Alabama?
I think that is something that we really need to have in terms of looking through all the waste, fraud, and abuse. President Trump is doing a great job of identifying areas of waste in the federal government. And yes, a big chunk of the waste in government is on the federal level, but there is also a need for that in the state and local levels as well. It's important that we identify waste, fraud, and abuse and combat that on all levels of government. And I'm committed to doing that if fortunate enough to be Alabama's next state auditor.
Under current law, the auditors, department is responsible for maintaining a property inventory of all state property worth $500 or more. There is talk in the legislature, I don't believe it went anywhere this session, raising that to like $1,500, right, which would dramatically decrease the amount of property that y'all are responsible for. Are you in favor of that change, or do you think we should keep it at the $500 level?
Well, I'm aware of talks regarding that. I think that it's important that the $500 threshold has been set by statute and it has not been changed for decades. And something to take a look at is adjusting that threshold to reflect the inflation index.
So, Derek, if you win this race right here, in 8 years, there'll be a lot of seats open. Could we see Derek running for a higher office?
Well, I really appreciate you even thinking of me in that respect, but I really am just focused on wanting to serve the people as state auditor. I think it's important. A lot of young folks interested in politics want the brass ring, and they want the brass ring right now. But I think it's important for me to, as a person who is interested in public service, and that's really what this is being a servant to the public. I think it's important for me to run for an office where it's a very important office, but that I can also learn the ropes of state government and public service. And that's what I'm committed to doing.
What a
Derek,
great political answer.
You passed law school and you're an attorney now. What area of law do you practice in?
I mainly practice trust and estates law here in Jefferson County. I set up shop right out of law school here in Jefferson County. But I am actually closing down my firm so I can campaign full time. It's a big state, and I think it's so important. I love traveling to get to meet new people, and I think it's so important for folks seeking elected office to want to talk to as many folks as possible. And to do that in such a big state like Alabama takes a lot of time. And I'm committed to traveling the state to take my message of government, transparency, accountability to the people.
So how long have you been out of law school, Derek?
I graduated in December of 2020. I finished a semester early, so came in 18. But I finished semester early, so I was able to take the February bar because there's a February and a July bar. I was able to take the February bar in 2021.
This is maybe getting at you on a political ledge here, but it's looking like in the governor's race that nobody's declared yet, we're going to have Tommy Tuberville versus Will Ainsworth. Would you like to make an endorsement on that one?
Well, to the best of my knowledge, there hasn't been any
no declared candidates yet.
No declared candidates, and I guess time will tell on who ends up running for that office.
Where do you see the Republican Party headed? Do you see us continuing to move further to the right, or do you think we're going to go back to the center? Because right now the Democrats are just so far out left that I don't see anything anybody could ever negotiate with them on.
Well, I think that the Republican Party right now is in a really good spot. We're the party of common sense, and President Trump has done so much to build on the Republican Party, and he has done such a great job of expanding the Republican base. And I think that we're positioned in a very good situation right now with President Trump as the leader of our party.
Derek, if you're elected auditor, you've got to move, to be down in Montgomery to, actually direct the auditor deal. Are you comfortable with having to move to Montgomery?
Sure. Actually, Brandon, in the Constitution, the constitutional officers, I believe, with the exception of lieutenant governor, but all the other
lieutenant governor is a part-time job.
Every other constitutional position statewide must maintain a residence in the capital city, and I'm committed to doing so if I'm elected auditor, so I can do the people's work in the state capital.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, that was the whole Beth Chapman issue, remember, Christopher?
Oh, yeah. I recall that now. So there's something I was going to ask about Montgomery, but yeah. There. So while you've been out here on the campaign trail and you tell the story, so the voters have been very receptive of this.
They have been, and it's been really encouraging to see. I'm, of course, not a traditional candidate here in Alabama, but I think that, once I tell folks my story, why conservative principles are so important to me, why American principles are so important to me, seeing the threat of communism posed to the U.S. firsthand, with family members that I've talked to about. I think that the voters have been very receptive, and I think that our campaign's message of ensuring government transparency and accountability is really resonating with the people.
That's all I have, Derek. Unless you got something you'd like to add.
Yeah, would you like to add anything to, like a closing statement? Because I think that's all the questions I had too.
Sure. I just want to thank both of y'all for having me on your podcast. My name's Derek Chen. I'm running for the Republican nomination for state auditor in the 2026 cycle. The Republican primary will be in May of 2026, and I look forward to meet as many folks as I possibly can. I am a proud American citizen born and raised in this country. I love my country. I love the United States of America. And I love my state. I love the state of Alabama. And to be able to serve Alabama as your next state auditor would be a great honor.
Thank you, Derek, for coming on.
Derek.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes, sir.